Well, yeah, thank you, thank you. So yeah, as Dan said, my name is Dan, and this is my coworker Jake. He was willing to come along with me, and we're going to kind of co-lead this thing and work through our outline together. And please, at any moment, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or holler or say, hey, can you explain that more? I do want to say, this session kind of outlines the 30,000 foot view. The next session that we have together will take it deeper and explain more of what we're going to present in this session. But we kind of wanted to pull the camera back, so to speak, and take a broad look at building a small group ministry and what that looks like, and leader formation, and how we do it at Ada. And as Jake's handing out these cards, I'll explain what these cards are for in just a second. But I did want to share a few things about our church. So we are from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we're both on staff at Ada Bible Church. And Ada Bible Church exists over 4 campuses. We know that that may be unique. We know that multi-campus is becoming more and more popular, but we are a multi-campus church. We have 4 campuses. Each of those campuses, just to give you context, I'm a little insecure sharing what I'm about to share because I don't want to come off as bragging. If I can just say, every single person who walks through our door, we consider a gift from God. And the fact that He's growing His church is an immense blessing. We take zero credit for that. But right now we exist over 4 campuses. Each of those campuses is above the 1,500 range. So we have large campuses. And so as you can imagine, we are attempting to help large campuses that can feel like a crowd, feel like a family, feel like you're connected, helping people move from walking in and hearing a sermon to actually connecting and developing relationships and being part of a group. And so we want to talk about that. And so just a few factors. We've made a lot of mistakes as we've learned how to do small groups at Ada Bible Church. So what you're going to get today is the fruit of a lot of conversations, a lot of hard work, a lot of, I guess, difficult seasons where we've learned and grow and tried this and it didn't work. And this is where we are today. You're kind of going to get a snapshot of that. We are thrilled at Ada Bible, though, because as of last fall, we had 71% of our adults in a small group. And that's the highest. Yeah, that's the highest we've ever had. And we do 2 events each year to help people move into a small group. And we just had our most recent one last week. Last Sunday, we launched across our 4 campuses, we launched, was it 50 groups? 50?
Yeah, I think it ended up being 65 with all.
65 all told. And we're in a series right now called The Grace Effect. And we're asking the question, if generous God was so willing to step into creation and reach out in relationship to us, what does that mean how should that practically affect our lives? How can we be generous with our finances, with our speech, with forgiveness, things like that? And so we have groups that have formed around a study called Balanced, and we launched them. And so we're just in a really encouraging season at Ada Bible Church right now. And so, if you look at our ministry, we like to say we're not a church with small groups. We are a church of small groups. From the moment someone is born, as they travel through Ada Bible's ministry, when they move into children's ministry, they're in a small group. They have a small group leader. They have a teaching, and then they break into groups during their children's ministry time. When they're in student ministry, junior high, senior high, they have a small group leader, and they break into small groups after they hear the teaching to dialogue, to learn, to grow. We move adults into small groups. We have a ministry to our college and career we call Union, and they have a teaching, and then they break into small groups to discuss that teaching and talk about, okay, so what? So what do we do with this? And then, of course, adults, and we put adults in groups, men's groups, women's groups. We have what we call community groups, and that's individuals and couples who join a group. And we'll define all of that as we spend our time together. But just want to kind of give you a snapshot of where we are, and it's just a really healthy, encouraging season in our church right now. We're really excited that we get to talk about groups. So like I said before, this is kind of the 30,000-foot view in this session, and then in the second session, we're really going to drill down. What does it look like to be a healthy group? And we just want to share what we've learned and what we do. And we've got lots of resources we're going to hand out to you. Feel free to take them. We have digital copies. We're going to hand out our business cards. You can email us, and we will forward you all that stuff. And you can do whatever you want with it. You can tweak it. You can put your own logo on it. You can redo the language that fits your context. Please feel free to do that and ask for that. We just want to share. God has been so gracious to us. We just want to, whatever we can do to help, we would love to do. But we want to start with this card. So you're probably wondering what this card is about, and I don't want you to give much thought to this. Jake's going to come out and collect these in a minute. And we have pens if you need one. Just feel free to raise your hand and we can give you a pen. If you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go? Just write down that destination on your card. It could be Lambeau Field. It could be Aaron Rodgers' house. It could be Costa Rica. Just write down whatever first thing that comes to your mind. Where would you go anywhere in the world if you could? And then we'll collect them.
Excuse me, Jake. No, I sat too close.
Your card? I heard that. Sorry. Now, as Jake's collecting those, I do want to acknowledge, I'm quite certain that this room is a mixture of guys. Some of us are on staff, some of us are on a ministry team, some of us are here because this is an awesome conference and we have just an opportunity to be encouraged. Our hope is that as we talk about this, it might provide ideas, it might open up some thinking in your own team, ministry teams. And as you go back, regardless of whether you're on staff or not, as you go back into your churches, there might be some things you can take from here and utilize, whether you're leading a group or you can maybe go back to your leadership and influence your leadership and start a pretty healthy conversation. So we recognize that, so we're attempting to be sensitive to that. But I just want to read through some of these. I won't read through them all, but so the question is, where would you go if you go anywhere in the world? What destination would you pick? So I got Utah, Brazil, Italy, Israel, another Israel, Ireland. Let's see, what's this one? Bora Bora, Hawaii. It's interesting that a lot of these are warm weather destinations. So I don't think that's by accident. Holy Land, anywhere with coral reef, Yosemite. So what do you notice about that? What just strikes you as I read through those?
None of them were in Wisconsin.
None of them are over from Wisconsin, yeah. But they're all different, they're all unique, right? One of the most significant challenges that I think we have faced as a small group ministry is you have staff and ministry leaders with very different ideas about where we should go. And you have church people, your congregation, who has very different ideas about where you should go. And our assumption, our presupposition that we bring into this conversation is you cannot, I think it is close to impossible to build a healthy small group ministry unless you have unity on your ministry team, unless you have unity on your church staff. You have to decide from a multiple of different choices, where are we going to go? What is our vision for small groups? What do we want our people to become? That will help narrow down what you do with your resources. Because one of the things that we've learned at Ada is resources follow vision. You have to nail down your vision. You have to decide where we're going and what we want our people to become. And the challenge is you've got good people with good hearts. And all the choices, like there's nothing right or wrong about any of these places. It's not good or bad, it's not right or wrong. It's the first destination you thought of, and it's the same thing in a church family. You have people with very good ideas about where to go, but the challenge in building a small group and a healthy small group ministry is there's a lot of different directions that can go. And so as a team, you have to decide, well, what are those options? And what option do we want to pick as a church ministry? That's the direction we're going to go. That's the direction we're going to resource. So let me just run through a quick few scriptures. So we asked the question to Ada, what do we want our people to become? And we thought the best place to look was the scriptures, and let's figure out, what does God want our people to become? And so the first verse that came to mind, many of you heard this, Matthew 28, 19 through 20, where Jesus is kind of giving his last piece of advice, his last marching orders to the disciples. All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. This is Jesus speaking. He says, therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. It's pretty clear what Jesus wants from us. He wants us to make disciples. And it's interesting to me that the church is the only organism on the planet that has been given the responsibility of making disciples. That mission belongs to the church. The church is the caretaker of that. There's a lot of good ministries that come alongside churches, but the church's primary mission is making disciples. And so as you think through the scriptures, just a couple more that come to mind. Matthew 22, 37 through 40. What's the greatest commandment? Love God, love people. So just from the words of Jesus, it's making disciples that love God and love people. And how we've answered this question to Ada then is, well, let's go into the New Testament. What does Paul talk about? He's writing to these churches, these fledgling churches that are beginning to form. He's planted these churches, and he writes two very graphic examples to the church in Colossae and the churches in Galatia. And in Colossae, you get Colossians 3, 5 through 17, and many of you might be familiar with this passage where he says, put to death. Put to death anger, rage, malice, sexual immorality. And then he says, put on, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, self-control. And then in the churches in Galatia, very similar. In Galatians 5, he talks about the sinful nature and the spirit-led nature. Sinful nature is lust, greed, things we're all very familiar with and we do not have to invite into our lives. And then he talks about the fruits of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and the list goes on. That gives a snapshot. This is what we want our people to become. We want our people to become fully devoted followers of Christ who reflect his heart, who do what he does, who express his character. And so that's how we've answered the question. And so our philosophy, Jake's going to hand out, we have 3 environments at Ada. We call it the row, the circle, and the chair. And I'm going to just briefly touch on these because I want to be real sensitive to our time and make sure we have time at the end for questions. So what does what environments does a disciple need in their life? What do they need to be paying attention to? What do they need to be participating in? And by the way, we stole this from North Point down in Atlanta. They they were the Pilgrims who started using this language, and we spent some time with them, and we found this to be incredibly helpful. So you have the row. You have a weekend service where people file into an auditorium. They're sitting in a row. There's relational contact, but not the kind of relational contact we're after. They hear a gifted speaker deliver a teaching from the Bible, and hopefully the speaker gives them ideas on how to apply that, but they have nowhere to process it. They have nowhere to discuss it. And that's where the circle comes in. The circle is a relational environment where people can gather together, men and women, students and children, depending on your age, and they can ask questions. They can learn, they can grow. Somebody knows their name, somebody knows their story. They can even object. We encourage our small group members, fight with the text. Feel free to object and say, I'm not sure I agree with that. Let's talk about that. And then, of course, you got the chair, which is hopefully daily space where we are inviting God into our life, and we give him at least 15 minutes of our day, and we're reviewing a section of Scripture and seeking to apply that to our lives. So these are the environments we have at Ada. These are the environments that we invite people to participate in order to become a disciple. And we want to talk about the circle, and I'm just going to kind of touch on this, and then Jake's going to come up and talk about how we do this. So at Ada, we developed this card, and Jake's going to hand it out so you have it in front of you. These are our values for small groups. This is the target. If somebody comes forward and says, what do you want your small groups to do? We show them this. We give them this. This is what they have in front of them. The 3 values, our mission statement is making disciples in relational environments. And the 3 values we hope each group demonstrates is they share life, they pursue God, and they invest in others. And this is a tool that we developed so we can literally meet with a small group leader. We can slide this in front of them and we can say, this is what you're going after. Here's the target. This is what we hope your group looks like. And this is also something as a group leader that you can take to your group and you can ask your group, how are we doing? How are we doing sharing life? How are we doing knowing each other's names and stories and what's going on in each other's lives? Are we building authentic, genuine relationships? How are we doing pursuing God? Are we actually opening the scriptures and digging into the text and learning who God is and what He hopes for in our lives? And are we investing in others? At some point, the circle ought to turn its chair and look out and start serving and investing in others. At the top of when I started, I mentioned that Ada Bible exists over 4 campuses. That's not exactly true. We have over 250 adult groups, probably getting close to 300 now. I don't know what that number is. We have 300 campuses. We have 300 groups that are spread out in the community, that are in neighborhoods, coffee shops, and boardrooms. And their job is in those contexts. Their responsibility is to share life, pursue God, and invest in others. How powerful is it for a group that is gathered around the scriptures and building relationships? They're doing this in a boardroom in their office building. They've got all sorts of opportunities to serve. They're doing this in a coffee shop. People walk by, they notice that this group gets together every week or every other week, and they're opening the Bible and they're talking, they like each other. There are opportunities to serve. And of course in neighborhoods. You're meeting in someone's home, you drive by many homes to get to your home, and you've got a neighborhood. How can that group meet the needs of that particular neighborhood? So that's what we hope for. That's a broad description of what we do, our philosophy, and then what we hope a healthy small group looks like. And now you might be wondering, well, how do we encourage people to get into something like that? How do we encourage them to move into a group? And Jake's going to come up and talk about that. Thank you.
Yeah, so Dan's going to be passing out these little forms that we end up giving to people, give them a little information. But what I'm particularly going to talk about is called group launch. And group launch, we do it twice a year. And for us, it's the on-ramp into a group. This is the opportunity for people who are single, married, any walk of life to come to an event where we can host. We can be welcoming and inviting and allow them to come in. All they have to do is give us a little information about who they are, and we hope that they go from not being in a small group, not experiencing life-changing community, and then they come to this event and they get to walk out knowing who's in their small group. They've gotten to know them a little bit. And so there's a few key things we do with group launch, and this card, or this what you're getting, are 2 cards that we hand out prior to. We talk about group launch from stage. We encourage people. We show stories about people that have been in a group and the success that they've had. And then we ask for some information. And Dan's going to discuss some of the information in a few minutes. But the event itself, there's a few things that we do. First is we want people to feel comfortable when they come in. So first off, we have name tags for them. And the name tag, it just kind of says, we were expecting you. When you walk inside the door, there's a table, and we've got your name, and it's already written down. You were anticipated, and you were planned for. We've got a table number right underneath, say, hey, here's where you're going. And you go there, and there's a leader who's already anticipating, ready to see you. We get to eat a meal together, who's now going to be your small group, and we find that just opens the door to relationships starting. And then we walk through a process of just getting to know one another, deciding where to meet, deciding when you're going to meet, and those types of things. And the hope is the big win for group launch is A, people are in a group, but then B, they're going to want to come to that group. Because when they leave the following Monday at 7 o'clock to go to a small group, I'm not headed to 3302 Broadmoor Avenue. I'm heading to Jim and Susan's. You know what? I know Jim and Susan. I just had dinner with Jim and Susan the week before. And it's just an opportunity for them to feel comfortable. And although for us that sometimes can seem like maybe not the biggest deal, that can be the difference between somebody coming to group launch or wanting to come to a group and then not taking that step to get involved in what we believe is life-changing community. So it's a really simple concept, honestly, but it requires a lot of organization, in particular forethought beforehand. And so Dan's going to talk a little bit about what we do, how we get information, and what we do with that information to help set us up.
Yeah, and I want to run through this real quickly, but basically on the left side of this handout, you can see we ask for people's contact information, and we ask this for a reason. How we put groups together at Ada is we start with stage of life. What stage of life are you in? Because what we've learned in our context, this may not be true for every context, but what we've learned in our context is when you put people together who are in similar stages of life, there's a better chance, I hate to use the word chance, but there's a better chance that their group is going to thrive and it's going to survive because they're in this similar stage of life. They can share what's going on in their life, and there's commonality there. There's unity in that. So we put together people based on stage of life. We put based on geography. How close do people live? It's really difficult for somebody who lives 20 miles, 25 miles, 30 miles away from their small group to be able to consistently show up. And so we attempt to take, that's why we ask for their address. We literally sit down with Google Maps, our small group pastors, and they have these pile of cards as people sign up, and they're Google mapping addresses. How close do these people live? How far apart are they? Most likely, people will drive 30 minutes one time a week. They'll come for a church service. But to ask them to be part of a small group, and if they have kids, be part of a junior or senior high, or be part of a men's Bible study, women's Bible study, for them to try and latch on during the week and make that commute several times, that's a lot to ask. And so with our campus philosophy, what we've done is, that's where we put campuses. Where do we have large pockets of people driving to church? Let's go put a campus there. And now they have access, it's close, and they can access ministry, and that's kind of our philosophy with groups. Let's go where they are, and let's create these groups based on geography. So you have stage of life, geography, and then campus. Because we're multi-campus, we want to make sure that couples, individuals are bumping into each other at a weekend service. We want to help the row feel familiar. We want people to see each other on a Sunday morning when they're attending one of our weekend services. And so we think through stage of life, geography, and campus, and then of course prayer. One of the most beautiful things, just a second, one of the most beautiful things right before a group launch is to watch our small group pastors as they've got these pile of cards and they're putting them in piles and they're just praying through these cards. Dear Lord, show me where to put this card. And then to have, after the event, to have people come up and say, how'd you know? How'd you know to put us in that group? And we say, we didn't. God did. And it's really cool to hear that. So
I'm curious what you mean by put people together. So are you like gathering this information beforehand and then putting this together at the group launch like before? Are people not really picking and choosing? If you could just help explain the process.
Absolutely.
I'm lost.
Yep, great question. So the group launch event happens separately from our weekend services. It is an actual event. And as Jake described, people walk in, they grab a name tag, they have a table to go to. At that table is their group. Their group members are sitting at that table. Their leader is at that table. And so they're meeting their group at that table. We've done all the work for them. They don't have to worry about where do I go, what do I do. We try to eliminate all those hurdles, and we put them at a table where they're getting introduced to the people that they're going to actually do group with. So they meet those couples, they meet their leader at that table, and over 2 hours, we walk them through some questions so they can get to know each other. And then when they leave, they've got, we'll hand out this in just a moment, but they've got this roster sheet in their hand. They know who their leader is, they know who their group members are, and they've got their contact information. And so like Jake said, next week, when they're walking up Jim and Susan's driveway, they already know who Jim and Susan are. They already know who's going to come through that door later in the evening. We've done the first meeting for them. And during that group launch, and we'll talk more about this in the second session, in our group launch event, we attempt to model what a healthy small group should look like. So the way we ask questions, the conversation we attempt to create around those tables helps that group begin to know each other, so they walk away, they come in as strangers, and they walk away familiar with one another and ready to meet the following week or 2 weeks later. Is that helpful?
Yeah, so, yes. So when are you gathering this information? Like at one event, or is it over
Yep.
the course of a period of time?
About 2 weeks out
Okay.
from the group launch event, we start announcing this in our services. We have group launch coming up. Now's your time to register to sign up. Go to this table, go to this spot in our atrium. We'll have a small group pastor there. We'll have some volunteers there who will walk you through this process, help you register, help you sign up, and then they give you this sheet, the second part of this form, what to expect at group launch. And so we have all their information, and so over 2 weeks prior to the event, our small group pastors are putting those cards together in groups so that when they show up, they go right to their table and that's their group. We do all the work. They just need to sign up, we do the work, we get them at a table, and they can launch.
And are some of these groups also like men's groups and women's groups? Like,
Correct.
so could this be executed on a micro level, like say for the men of a church?
Absolutely.
They would all sign up, and then you would pick and
Absolutely.
pick and pray over it and plug them into
Yep.
something based on what they.
Absolutely. Yeah, we launched men's groups and women's groups as well last week.
Sure.
Yeah, that's just some hints.
Do you limit, I think you mentioned an eight in a group, do you limit the size of the group to 8 people?
You know, that fluctuates. We never go north of 12. We don't want to go below 8. So that 8 to 12 is kind of the sweet spot for us at Ada. The risk you run is, and I'll tip my hand, I prefer 8. I think 4 couples is the sweet spot. But we have small group pastors who feel that same way with 5 couples or 12 people, depending on if it's individuals or couples. So what we try to do is the small group pastor is free at their campus to kind of, if they want to build 8, if they want to build 10, if they want to build 12. The risk you take is if a couple doesn't show up, or a couple of couples or individuals don't show up. Does somebody go to a table and they're the only one sitting at the table? And then it's the job of the small group pastor to help that person or couple move over to a table where they can get into a group.
Another question, do you ever meet any resistance from people as to what group they're being put into?
We
How do you deal
do.
with that?
It's a great question. We do, but very rarely. As we walk through the group launch event, there's a section up top where the pastor who's presenting, who's kind of hosting this event, we ask the people at the table to be patient. We're all strangers, and we kind of go with the old cliche, don't judge a book by its cover. Some of our groups that have lasted the longest are groups that were patient, and their initial perception was that this group is never going to fly, I'm never going to get along with this person. And we hear story after story of just give it time, be patient, get to know each other, learn each other's stories. But when we do meet resistance, we ask why. One, what's the hang up? And then we attempt to, if we need to, slide them into another group so that they walk away that evening as part of the group. You had a question? Yeah.
You said that you group people based on stage of life. So I think one of the things I've observed in small groups is a big blessing of it is having people at different stages of life that are able to speak wisdom
Yeah.
from, because they've been there before. How do you still achieve that when everyone's like a college age kid that doesn't know what's going on?
Awesome question. Great question.
Could you repeat the question for the tape, please?
Yeah. So the question is, what do you do? we put together groups based on stage of life, but there is value in having people in different stages of life who can speak wisdom into each other's lives. And that is true, and we believe that. And we actually have begun to ask that question, and we do have groups that request that. We do have people that request, I want to be in a group where there are people 10 years, 15 years ahead of me, so they can speak into what I'm experiencing now. The way we've compensated for that, as things stand right now, is we come through the care department, and we provide mentors. We coach and train and develop mentors. We have mentors who do marriage mentoring, financial mentoring. We have purity mentoring groups that we have for guys struggling with healthy sexuality. We have mentoring groups for women whose husbands can't get out of the trap of pornography, and they're attempting to heal and have a healthy marriage. So for now, what we've done is we're pouring resources into developing mentors because we're not ready to make that shift in our small group culture yet. Go ahead.
Just a secondary thing. So people can be a part of multiple groups that run at different times during the week based on this?
Yep. Yeah. Question is, can people be involved in multiple groups? And the answer is yes. We have all sorts of people in our church who are part of a men's group and a small group, women's group and a small group. They're in a purity mentoring group. That happens all the time.
Follow up to your resistance. What do you do with the situation? Somebody says, "You put me in Jim and Susan's group, but I'd rather be with Mark and Melanie. I know them better."
Sure. I think there's two ways you can go with that, and I think one of the things that we try to do as a church is we try to frame biblical community in, we're not consumers. We don't want to bring a consumer mindset to the church. It's not about me. And I think very subtly it can quickly turn into that I'm going to get what I want, and I want the type of people that I'm comfortable with, and we all know that's not biblical community. Biblical community is diverse. People from all different walks of life, different genders, different experiences, different cultures, gathering together in a circle. And so I think what we try to do is we try to frame what is biblical community and help our people understand that, and to give the group a shot, give it a try. You never know what God might do with this. If they're really resistant, though, it's not worth the fight. We'll slide you into Jim and Susan's, or Mark and whoever the opposite couple is. We'd rather you be in community of some sort than win this battle. And hopefully, as you're in community, you will learn and grow, and you'll look back on this as a pivotal moment where God did some pretty cool work on your understanding of community. My alarm. Go ahead.
Do you change up your groups every year? Or do you try to keep them the same as they go through life?
Yes.
Nice.
That's awesome. So, did everybody hear the question? Do you
Yes.
change up your groups, or do you have them together for life? We tell leaders, and whenever we launch a group, whenever we do a group launch, we launch it around a sermon series. So we launched these last ones last week around our Grace Effect series. Back in the fall, we did a sermon series on Philippians. We launched our groups around the book of Philippians. And what we asked them to do, please commit for the duration of the sermon series. Leaders, would you commit for the duration of the sermon series? Group members, would you commit to the duration of the sermon series? When the sermon series, as it's coming to a close, it's the small group pastor's job to reach out to that leader and ask them, how can I help? Do you guys think you're going to keep going? Do you think you're going to transition into another study? Do you get a sense that you guys have had a good run, but you've got couples who want to jump into a different group, or you've got schedule issues, babysitting challenges, and the group just isn't gaining traction? And so we hope that groups stay together. We don't tell them they have to break up. We don't tell them that they have to stop. Whenever a sermon series group launch comes around, we tell existing groups, hey, we'd love for you to go through this sermon series together and go through this material, but they're free to pick their own material. Most of them take our advice and go through that material. But then we form new groups, and we want to give them the freedom. We assume that the small group leader knows their group best. And so we try to equip and encourage the leader to walk that group through that process. And if it would be better for them to call it quits and go somewhere else, we'll help do that. If it's, hey, let's keep going, what resources do you need?
How long is the typical sermon series that you're talking about?
Question is, how long is a typical sermon series? We try to do 6 to 8 as a rule of thumb, but they can go as long as 10 to 12. We try not to go beyond 12, just because of our culture. People just start to lose interest, and we start to lose interest. So 6 to 8 is kind of our sweet spot, but our fall series typically starts the week after Labor Day and goes to the week before Thanksgiving. That's typical. That's usually our longest series. Yes, sir.
As you mentioned couples, what do you do with singles? Do you try to group them together or intermingle?
Yeah, that's been a hard nut to crack for us. We don't have a singles ministry. And so what we attempt to do is, because we are a small group, we are a church of small groups, we attempt, regardless of whether you're single or whether you're married, we want you in a small group of some sort. So if you're not comfortable being in a group where there's couples, would you consider joining a men's or women's group? That's how we supplement that. Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to jump, Jake. I feel like I'm taking over.
If you were to choose a strategic time of year to launch to do this on, like just specifically for a men's group, what season would you choose? Fall, summer, spring?
It's a great question. When would you, and you're speaking specifically of men's ministry?
Yeah, men's. I mean, if that our church was to try to do this on, like just for men, what might be a good time? Is there any?
Yeah. No, Tom, that's a very good point.
Well, I mean, because we can
Yep.
make excuses for any time.
You
It's
can.
spring, it's time to get outside. It's summer, it's.
Absolutely. I think the question is, how do you do this in the men's ministry context? When's a good time? When's an optimal time to launch a men's groups? And in all seriousness, I would stay away from, in this area, having lived here for a year and a half, don't fight the Packers.
Nope.
Just don't. I came in with a whole lot of idealism. I'm going to fight this battle. I'm going to crack this nut. And then I realized it's not worth it. These are good people with good hearts. They love Jesus. But don't fight the Packers. It's just not worth it. And summertime, that can be a challenge. I really do think you need to think through your context and think through, if it's best to wait till after football season. How can we create the most optimal space? What can we do to communicate how important it is to be in a group? And so I would say you want to create the environment, you want to create the optimal time, but then you have to envision. And as guys, we know that. We're always asking the question, why? Why should I be involved? Why should I do this? We all have so many other things that we choose to be doing. Why should I carve out 2 hours of my week to be part of a men's group? And I think if you can envision, then it won't matter when you launch them. Now, you got to have the summer conversation, you got to have the football conversation, but if you can envision guys, if you can give them a challenge, if you can give them a summit to climb, man, we're in. I want to be challenged. I want to prove that I can do this, and I think that's huge. Yes, sir.
With your changing groups, let's say, at the end of a sermon series, doesn't that become a logistics nightmare for you when you're trying to coordinate new groups or the possibility of new groups and people going from one group to another? How do you manage that?
Fantastic question. So the question is, how do you deal with all the logistics when a sermon series ends? And quite frankly, it hasn't been a difficult challenge at Ada because we have a small group pastor who's responsible for their leaders at that campus. And that small group pastor's responsibility is to build relationship with those leaders. And so they're having these conversations throughout a sermon series. They're checking in via email. They're checking in over coffee or lunch. They're hitting each other up in the atrium at a weekend service. We ask our small group pastors as best they can to be present at each of our services so that their leaders can bump into them and ask them questions. And so there's this constant dialogue. And so when a sermon series ends, most often what happens is the group will just jump into the next sermon series, but we also have other resources for them. And we'll talk more about that in our second session. We have a litany of resources that we offer our small group leaders. But then you have the one or two, maybe three, handful of groups that decide, you know what, we're going to call it quits. Can you help us? Absolutely. We can help couples move into another group. We can put them on hold. Hey, we've got a group launch coming up in 2 months. Can you sit tight and we'll help you get into a new group? There's all sorts of ways we can do that. And we found that small group pastor is really crucial to helping work through that.
I just want to jump back to the forming before. I'd say stay away from, I'm in a men's group, and summer can be terrible because people are off on vacation or with their families or
Absolutely.
having company. So
Yep.
I'd say don't do summer
Yeah.
if you can avoid it.
That's a great point. And we tell our guys, last year we tried something for the first time. We tried to launch groups after Memorial Day, some men's groups, and it was a struggle. It was a challenge. And we tell our people, enjoy summer. We only get 3 months where the weather's beautiful and it's gorgeous. Go to your cabins, go to the lake, enjoy that. But we try to supplement that with resources so they can stay connected to their church. And we'll talk about that in the second session. So we've got, so 1 minute?
We're probably about there now.
1 minute, one more question. Yeah.
You mentioned in the beginning that you have stuff online, like formats and stuff. What's the website?
Yeah, website is adabible.org, ADA, and then Bible, and then .org. You can go to our website. We've got some resources on there, and then we're going to hand out our business cards, and you can email us directly, Jake or I, and we'll be happy to send you any digital files that we have, and you can utilize those. Yeah, and then Jake's going to hand out, this is a resource we give every new group. They go through this, it's called Launching Well, and it walks them through the first 6 weeks of their group so they can launch well, hear each other's stories, and begin to develop relationships. And we're going to talk about that in the second session, but we wanted you to have a copy of it if you got another session that you're heading to. Please, please, please email any questions that didn't get asked, or if you walk away and have more questions. We love emailing. We'll set up a phone call, whatever it takes. We'll Skype. We want to help any way that we can. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.